How do you create an effective recruitment phase when building a roster? The most important thing, before we even begin, is to know what you're looking for. Know what kind of culture you want as a coach, so you can make sure you're finding players who share a similar vision. Make sure they fit with the organization's values and expectations. And lastly, if you already have some players, make sure they are a play style fit. A lot of teams, including in the LEC, simply look for the best players in all roles. But we see this fall down time and time again. Know what you're looking for, and the recruitment process becomes 10 times easier. Once you have your target, the first step is you build an exhaustive list. This is everyone who is playing at your level and might be interesting. It doesn't matter if they're under contract. It doesn't matter if you think they're going to be out of your budget or if you think they won't be interested in the project. You want to put all possible options on this list. You're doing this to avoid the situation of getting partway through the recruitment process and having someone come to you and say, "Have you thought about this certain player?" So anyone who would be interesting and you're prepared to chase down needs to go on this first list. If you're in the LEC and you're looking for a new mid laner, then by all means put Chovy if you want. His contract is expiring at the end of this year. As I mentioned, the list should be exhaustive. Step 2 is to filter that list down. Inquire about contracts if the players are with other organisations. Maybe they're open to a buyout. And start to inquire about salary expectations. Are they going to be within your budget? Ask if they even have a general interest in the project. In the ERLs, for example, there are some players who are so happy in a certain country or with a certain team that they aren't interested in moving, for better or worse. This gives you a much more filtered down list of players. Now, it'll still be long, but it'll be much shorter. Now, step 3 is your shortlist. Not only do you want to reduce the list for a second time, aiming for 4 or 5 players per role max, you want to prioritise the people that you have listed, put them in an order. You filter down by watching gameplay, using recommendations from players or people within the industry that you trust, and you look at stats. Stats don't show you who is good, but they can show you where to look. This is another reason it's so important to know what kind of player you're looking for. For example, the best KDA for a support player isn't necessarily going to be the best thing for you if you need engage, if you need a playmaker. So perhaps prioritize kill participation or K+A at 15. And this can show you players who deserve closer inspection, who you might have otherwise overlooked. Step 4 is the beginning of the actual tryout phase. This should include an interview, references, and POVs. The interview should be fairly short. You could end up doing quite a lot of these, so you don't want to be spending multiple hours with every candidate at this stage. As with the process overall, you need to know what you're looking for. What kind of things are you trying to get out of this interview? Make sure every single question is justified. You know why you're asking it, and importantly, you know how you're going to judge the answer. For me, for example, I have scorecards based on several key factors that I believe are important in identifying whether a player is what I'm looking for, so I can mark these off as I go. It's very important that all your interviews include 2 interviewers. It cannot just be you. Partly, it helps have an extra person to prevent misreads or misinterpretations. It's also great to have someone to make notes while you're leading the interview. But most importantly, having an extra person limits any biases you might have, either conscious or unconscious. A perfectly reasonable candidate could say something in the first 5 minutes that throws you off and makes you judge them overly harshly. Ensuring there are always 2 people or more giving the interview will give you a much more representative outcome. For references, make sure you're getting as many as you can from multiple different sources. Don't just take their last coach. Don't just take a player who's a friend. Multiple angles, multiple sources, and multiple teams. There are players that really didn't thrive in certain team situations, and if you only take references from that team, you'll be left with an incorrect impression. Lastly, get POVs. These are a lot more effective than scrim tryouts. As well as taking much more time and coordination, tryouts are more likely to give false data than correct data. Even if you somehow manage to make the level of opposition in tryouts consistent, no one performs the same in a tryout to how they do day to day. Some perform worse, some perform better. Some talk more, some talk less, but no one performs or behaves the same. POVs are not only much faster, as you just need to put the time in yourself, they also give you a sense of what the player is like once they're integrated into a team, how they actually perform. Make sure you get both competitive and scrim POVs, and you'll see their performance difference under pressure too, which you couldn't get from just a tryout. Now the first phase of your recruitment is done. If you don't have any candidates you like, revisit your shortlist and pick the next one down. Once you do have someone you'd like to take on, bring them to the second stage of the process, a longer interview. Once again, make sure that every single question is justified and you're not having a long interview just for the sake of it, but because you really need to decide if the player is a cultural fit, so it has to be deep. I like to give players some questions in advance so I can see how their thinking is once they've had a chance to mull things over, and also have questions asked just in the interview to see how they respond in the moment. As with the first interview, the same principles apply. Make sure you have multiple interviewers, make sure you know what you're looking for, and make sure you know in advance how you're going to judge what you're looking for. Then, if the player's stats and gameplay put them on your shortlist, their references, their POVs, and their first interview took them to the second stage, and the longer interview made you feel confident that they will fit not only with the organisation, but into the vision of what you see for the team, then congratulations, you get to make your first offer. Now, there are things that are very common in esports that must be stopped. I'm not talking about bad practice. This is absolutely immoral. You cannot say you give a damn about mental health if you keep acting this way. Stop ghosting people. Update everyone who is on the process. Anyone who has had an interview with you, give them consistent updates on developments. Set a reminder in your calendar and email them once a week, even if it's just to say, there are no updates, we're expecting to have an answer by the deadline we previously stated. And more importantly, don't let them fucking find out on Twitter. It's not hard. Even in the LEC, people find out they were fired or they lost their job to another candidate via a Twitter leak. We're talking about people's lives. This isn't a game. You're destroying another human's mental health just because you're scared of having a difficult conversation. Grow up. Keep the number of people who know the decisions as small as possible. Do not work with agents who leak it instantly, and draft an email to all the other candidates the second you put the phone down with someone accepting the offer. It can't be possible that a journalist can find out and write an article or post before you draft a 20-word email. Anyone who behaves like this has firstly never experienced it, and is secondly either completely uncaring about other human beings or actively malicious. It's so easy to do better, so we must do better.